Okay, everyone, welcome back to our Intro to Maya series. And in this demo, we're going to be making this guy. This is a red wagon, and it's a little bit more complex than the soda can that we had made earlier. And so we're going to talk about how to make each of these different parts using some of the same tools as well as some of the newer tools ahead of time, and kind of how to approach making something that's a little bit more complex. So I've got a couple of reference images to work from. So this image is really nice, and the fact that I could see some of these different ridges that are on the wheels. I can see the colors. I can see this ribbing, which is done on this stamped sheet metal, so that way it can kind of retain its structure more often. And of course, the structure that is the wheel axles and things like that. So I'm going to have to pay close attention. These two aren't the same wagons, so I've got to figure out how to kind of blend them together. And I'm going to really be working with this one right here. So with these reference images kind of close together, let's go ahead and get started. Let's count out how many cubes that I'm going to need. So this has 4 wheels, so I'm going to need 4 cubes there. This is going to need a part right here, so that's 5. This handle looks like it is 6 and 7, so handle part here, rod here, so 6 and 7. Of course, this big chunk right here is 8. And I'm going to need a bunch of different screws, so it looks like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, maybe a little bit more than that. So I'm going to need quite a bit of parts that are going to go into this, also including the axle that runs through there too. So let's start with some of the big stuff and work big to small. So big problems going down to small details. So I'm going to start with the very biggest portion of it, which is going to be just the bed of the wagon. So let's go ahead and create a cube right here. And I'm just going to immediately make this guy much bigger, and it is going to be longer. Notice how it's stretching in the front, so longer and flatter, kind of like that. And let's just double check to see if that's looking quite right. So yeah, it's about so. And it's pretty flat down there, so that's kind of about the shape, the overall shape that I want this to be. I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to call this wagon bed. Now I'm also going to make another cube, and we're going to slide this into the position of the wheel, and it looks like it's just about yay high. And let's double check it. So we've got some room in between the wagon bed and the wheel. So let's make this guy a little bit forward, drop it a little bit smaller, and put it about right there. And since those wheels are identical, I'm not going to make 4 cubes for this. I'm just going to make one, build it all the way up until it's complete, and then kind of copy and paste it all the way where it needs to be. So we'll leave that guy alone. I also need an axle that is going to be, somewhere right here. And this guy is going to be a little bit longer. And so we're going to put that just about right there. And so what I'm doing is I'm doing what we call a block-in. So this is, I need to figure out just how many components I need to make this guy. And I'm just going to use very simple cubes to put these in place. Now, something else that I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this guy, and I'm going to copy and paste this one right here. That way I know that this is directly in center with my other axle. So something like that. Let's scoot this in a little bit. And let's move these down. There we go. And let's see, what other components am I missing? So I'm missing a handle. So let's go ahead and make that. I'm going to take this cube, put it about right there. And let's grab this face and pull it all the way up. And let's make this guy just a hair thinner. There we go. And so that gives me a decent amount of stuff to work on. So let's focus on one thing at a time. Let's see, I'm going to rename this axle. I'm going to rename this wheel 1. And we're going to call this handle 1. There we go. So I'm just going to start with the bed for now, because I've got that in kind of the right general shape and the general form. And so if we look at our wagon bed, we'll notice that it's hollow, so it kind of curves inside there as well, and so we know how to make that. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this top face right here, and I'm going to delete it. So that way it's hollow. But I don't want to see the inside of my object right here. Notice how it's in black, it's the void. So we want to fix that, and the best way that we're going to do that here is we're going to hold shift and extrude this in. Now I'm going to play around with this because I'm noticing that, this face right here, this square is thinner than how this one is over here. So I'm going to take, these two corners, and I'm going to shrink them in to where it's kind of uniform, just like that, right? And now I can pull this down by extruding it. To create this inner wall, and I can use this new tool, which is called fill hole, and if it has an opening, a void, a hole right there, it will create a face to go into it. So this is one of the many ways that you can go about making, something that's hollow. However, if you want to be a little bit more precise with this, if I delete all of these guys in here, something else that you can also do is extrude this. Now, we've held shift and we've extruded individual faces, but you can also extrude whole objects like this, and this is really important for if we need to make, let's say, a clear transparent bottle or something like that. In our case, this wagon is, basically this shape, but has an inside and an outside. I can use the extrude tool. And so the way that you get to it is you can come up to Edit Mesh and you can click on Extrude. However, I'm just going to use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control E. And so if I hit Control E, I have this here, Poly Extrude Face 1. And if I change the thickness, I can make this super thick or super thin, in which case I'm liking 0.3. It's a ratio based on the scale, the relative scale that we have everything at. And now it has done all of that work for me. So two different ways to go about doing this. Pick whichever one is easier for you. I personally like using the Extrude tool, Control E. So once I do that, now I've got an inner and an outer portion, and let's go ahead and see what it looks like in preview mode, smooth preview mode. This definitely does not look like the kind of rounded rectangular shape that we really need it to be. So what it's missing is edge loops. Edge loops, as we talked about before, the more edge loops that you have, the more rigid that this will look, especially when they're close together and they create a crease. So let's go ahead and insert some edge loops. I think I'm going to need one in the center. Notice how it's already starting to look a little bit more pill-shaped. So let's do maybe 3 going up and down. And let's see what it looks like with, 1 going that direction. All right, it's getting there. So it's still looking a little bit more bold-like. And we'll notice that in our images, it's very much kind of straight. It has some curves, but it's very much straight right there. So let's go ahead and add edge loops on the inside and outside right there. Maybe we'll do 2 more up there at the top. That's starting to feel much better. And let's go ahead and just insert a couple more, just so we've got a little bit more fidelity, a little bit more structure and rigidity going on right here. So let's see, how curved is the inside of it? It's very much not curved at all, so that's a good thing. That tells me I can select these, and I'm holding shift and double clicking for edge loops right here, and I'm going to crease it. We've used that tool before, but let's go ahead and crease it. Whenever we use the crease command or tool, we always turn chamfer off, and I'm going to bring this down to like 0.3 or something, just so it's nice and rigid. Now, as we're working, we want to try to work with the minimum amount of edge loops that we can get away with. So I'm going to delete a couple of these guys and put some back in, just so that way they're a little bit more uniform and spaced out. There we go. We don't need this guy anymore, so I'm going to delete it. And again, going back to beveling it, we're just going to make sure that all of the spots that we want, a nice crisp edge right there, we're just going to bevel. And now we can see with not a lot of work, we are already, well on our way. I'm going to scoot this guy up, and I can always switch in and out of smooth preview mode just to see. So that way I can build in this lip that we can see going around here into my object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this area right here. And I'm going to extrude this out and maybe play with it a little bit, just so it's a little bit more uniform. There we go. And now I can bridge this back together. So we have deleted that loop faces, so that way we can extrude them out and then loop them together. And so now I've got a pretty decent lip right here, and I'm going to crease this inner part, turn chamfer off, and look at that. That is perfect. Let's scoot that down. Notice the closer that we get these two edges together, the more it's going to start kind of bending in place, which is going to be great. All right. So now that we've got a pretty good, somewhat high fidelity truck or wagon bed right here, let's go ahead and move on to some of the other components. So I'm going to unhide, let's do this pivot part right here. So this cube is going to be this weird T-shaped object that is kind of bound up into the top. So we're going to be using a couple of different new tools. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to turn symmetry on. That means whatever I do on the right side will also happen on the left side. So in order to turn symmetry on, I can hold Q down on my keyboard, right click and hold, and pull up to symmetry and turn symmetry on. And now you'll have a little text box right here that says symmetry object X. So this is the object and it's symmetrical on its x-axis, which means left and right. So if I select a face on the left, it will select a face on the right as well. So notice if I select it on the front or the back, since that's not on the left or right, it's just that one object, which is nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding some complexity onto this part right here. And I'm going to pull this out, so now it's making kind of this T shape, like how I want it right there. And with my reference open right here, looking at it, it looks like it tapers in, whoops, and gets thinner as it goes over to this portion right here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to grab this edge right here, notice symmetry is on, and I'm going to start pulling this guy and extruding it out. So it's kind of like this. There we go. And let's look one more time. I'm also noticing that it's starting to drop and lower itself. It's kind of curving downwards into that wheel well. So let's go ahead and do that now as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this face and I'm going to pull this down right here. And I'm just going to rotate this flat. Now I want this to be completely flat, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my scale tool and pull this axis down to where now the y-axis or the y elevation of this particular face is 0. It is completely flat. So just like that. All right, we're getting there. Now this is kind of a weird shape going on right here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert an edge loop right there in the center, and I can kind of take this guy and pull it open and just kind of massage it into being the shape that I want it to be. There we go, that's not so bad. All right. So now that we've done that, I can start to kind of modify this to look a little bit better. There we go. Perfect. All right. So this is, again, still all made with quads, which is really nice. That's how we want it to be. But I'm making sure that I've captured some of that curving in there, right, as it bends downwards and kind of slopes into what is going to be that axle right there that's going to run through it. So we've got that in, and we're almost done with it, but we'll leave this guy there for now because we'll circle back to it. Let's go ahead to our axle. Our axle looks pretty nice, so we're just going to leave that guy alone, and we're going to scoot it back a little bit. This guy we're going to make a little bit smaller, so I'm just going to select that as an object and maybe scoot it in. And now we're just going to kind of line up everything where we need it to be. Perfect. All right. The wheel, that's going to be fairly easy. So let's just have a double check at our wheel to make sure everything is going okay. So it's got this plastic rim with a red button that locks that axle into place. And then, of course, a rubber tire that goes around it. So let's go ahead and build that in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add more polygons onto this uniformly by using the smooth command. We haven't used this before, but it's kind of handy as so long as we know how to use it. So right up here, we've got our smooth command. Yours might look a little bit different from this. This is an older Maya version, but it's essentially the same. So if we click on it, notice how we have squared the number of faces on this particular object, which is very handy. So in taking this new guy, right, notice how it's a little bit more spherical in nature. I now have enough to work with if I want to do something like circularize this shape. So we're just going to hit that. It's circularized. We're going to hit that. It's circularized. Feels a little bit better. What I can even do right here is I can bevel this. So that way it has, instead of just one knife edge, it has two and creates a flat face right here. And this is going to be super handy because now I can kind of extrude this out or just select all of these faces, right? Kind of bring that out here, make it as thick as I need it to be. And then I can select these guys right here, kind of flatten them just like that. Perfect. There we go. What I can even do here is I can shrink this down and create my little red button. And all I'm doing is I'm just extruding and, kind of pulling that in and out. Maybe I'll bevel this, so that way I'll have a difference between the tire and the wheel itself. See what I did there? And it's on both sides because it's mirrored. So if I put this in smooth preview mode, I can see that's kind of what it's looking like right there. Maybe this guy, I need one more edge loop to help keep that guy in shape. And I'll bevel this so that way it's a little bit more crisp. And I'll bevel this so it's a little bit more crisp. Chamfer off. And there we go. That's not too shabby. Make it a little bit bigger because I lost some size there for some reason. There we go. All good to go. So that's my wheel. This I can put in smooth mode just to see. I can scoot that up on the axle. And now things are starting to get lined up. Right? Now let's talk about where that hinges on the handle and with that axle. So as you can see, it's kind of carved out into this L shape. So this guy will need to be a little bit more high fidelity. So let's go ahead and insert edge loops. I'm going to need 3 of them at least right there. So that ways I could take these guys and pull them out. See what I did there? There we go. And in order to keep this nice and kind of chamfered or beveled right there, I'm just going to insert a couple new edge loops so that ways I can keep this in place. Let's scoot this in so that's a little bit thicker. How's that looking? Getting there, looking okay. All right. I'm going to pull this out just a hair more. There we go. And so now I get to tweak some of this stuff. I get to make this guy just a hair thicker, and it's getting there. So let's see, what else is left? I'm noticing, if I look very closely, this is a nice sharp bevel right here, and that's probably from how this piece was stamped together. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete all of this stuff on the bottom, Control Delete, just like that. And now I can select this whole outer border. It's very easy with symmetry on, just like that. And I can hit bevel. And now I've got a nice sharp edge going around it, which feels really good. Okay. Let's move on. So I've got this handle part right here, and already I can tell this is made of a couple of different things going on here. So I'm going to look at this. It is a cylinder, and it goes into this kind of spherical shape right here. So that's what I need to make on here. So let's take this face, and it's kind of where I want it right now. And let's pull that down. And let's take this face, and I'm going to shrink this and pull this, translate it all the way up. There we go. And I'll delete that face up there. So now if I put it in smooth mode, you can kind of see what I'm going for. It needs a couple more edge loops, so I'm going to put, maybe one right there, slide it down a little bit, just so that way it's very close to that. And now I can take this face and scoot it up until it makes kind of a sphere, just like that, right? And we can push that over. I'm also noticing this has a bend right up here, so it bends not too far from the lip upwards. So we're going to go ahead and model that in. Let's grab that edge loop at the very top, and I'm going to hold Shift to extrude, and we're going to bend it. Looks like it bends inward, so that's feeling pretty good. If I want that to be a little bit more straight, I'm just going to add a bevel just like that, just like how we were using before. All right, now the handle looks like it is a second part that's welded, spot welded onto the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a rectangle shape that is kind of the overall profile of it, just like that. It's got a hole in the middle of it, so I'm going to delete it there. And if I select the entire object and extrude it, just like how we've used before on this bed, I can set a thickness that is reminiscent of our handle. And now it's kind of looking like this. And what I can even do is I can select these 4 edge loops right here and bevel them, so that ways I've got a nice kind of bend to it, just like that. So with that handle in place, I'm just going to rotate it until it lines up with my, there we go, object there, and we'll call it a day. Boom. All right. Now that we've got that taken care of, this axle, if I want this to be a tube, if I put it in preview mode, it looks very funky. It looks like a big thin spear. However, if I delete both of these faces out here, it is all good to go. It's now a tube. So we'll scoot that back in place. Now I haven't shown this before, but when making, some kind of precise objects, what you could do is you could change your view, this whole thing, from this three-dimensional way that we're looking at it to what we call a two-dimensional orthographic view. And the way we do that is very simply by hitting spacebar on your keyboard, and now we can see this is kind of lined up. So I can make sure that this, axle is properly lined up with my wheel, and everything is straightened up and ready to go. This is the top view, this is the front view, this is the side view, and I can even do things like change what I'm looking at. This is all with gray solid objects, but if I want to, I can switch it to wireframe mode. That way I can see through objects. It's almost like they're transparent. And the way we do that is by hitting 4 on our keypad, and that I can use to say, oh, I've got to line this up right there on that crosshair to where it's now perfectly in line, which is pretty nice. And to switch back to grayscale, I just need to hit 5. So 4 to go to wireframe and 5 to go to shaded mode. And if I want to go back to this and have this be the entire screen again, I just need to hover my cursor over my perspective view and hit spacebar again. And so I will cycle back and forth depending on what I need to make with precision. So this is getting pretty good, pretty close. I'm going to make this guy a little bit larger, and we're going to, let's do this. Raise this guy up. We're going to notice there is an axle that goes up into a well on the bottom right here. So I've got to make that axle down there as well. So I'm just going to take a cube. I'm going to delete the top. Maybe slide it up so that way I could delete the bottom. And that's going to create a cylinder in which I can, if I turn symmetry off, and I'll just hit Q, symmetry, and make sure that's unchecked. That's how you toggle it on and off. I can scale this up and bring this down. And now I've got this guy right here. How is that looking compared to my reference? It's upside down, so that's okay. We'll take this guy, and I'll just hold Shift, and I'll pull it downwards. That way it's a little bit better. There we go. Perfect. Easy enough. Now that we've made most of these components that are going to be mirrored or copied and pasted, right? Because we've got 2 axles, we've got 4 wheels. There's an easy way to do it, but the first thing that we've got to do is once all of these guys are complete, we're going to select everything and we're going to hit delete history and freeze transformations. So now all of that is gone. What I can do here is I can select this particular wheel and use a tool called the mirror tool. And this is right up here. It's this icon that says it mirrors geometry across an axis. And since I had built everything in the center, I can click on this and notice how it mirrors it from the right side to the left side. Now, once you do this, you have to click delete history, freeze transformations, but now I've got 2 wheels instead of 1. Pretty nifty. And you could do the same thing if you want it on the other side, let's say from the front to the back. Over here, I can select my 2 objects and hit mirror, but instead I'm going to change from the x-axis to the z-axis, and now they are across. So I've got 4 wheels exactly symmetrical with each other, and they're all placed right where they need to be. I can mirror this axle 2 across the z-axis and be done. Freeze history, delete transformations, or sorry, opposite way around. But now I don't need to worry about trying to line it up, making sure everything is level again, and stuff like that. Now, the final part that I'm going to make is this triangular shape down here, this well, since this side doesn't have to steer. So let's go ahead and create a cube. We're going to push this guy right there in the center. If I want this guy to be lined up, I just need to put it right there in the middle of the crosshair. There we go. And we're going to scoot this down. We're going to thin this out a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this face at the top and pull it all the way up and delete it. Control delete. So now there's just a hole there, but it doesn't matter because we don't see that face anyways. Now I get to pull this all the way open, kind of like that. So now there's a taper to it as well. There we go. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bevel these edges that go around. So I'm actually going to grab this face right here and hit the bevel tool. And that's going to do everything that I need it to already. So just like that, bevel, chamfer off. Let's turn this to a small number like 0.2, and we're good to go. I probably need one more edge loop right there. There we go. Feeling pretty good. Maybe round this in. All right. Just make sure that's nice and even. And there we go. Now we've got this component right here that we can mirror it onto the other side. So I'll just click that mirror tool again, delete history, freeze transformations, and now we have made an entire wagon in just about half an hour. Now, depending on the fidelity that you want to go to, you can also make these little rivets in there and the inside. And so what we can do is we can select these 3 edge loops. We can chamfer them so they're kind of like this. And with symmetry on, makes it easier. I can select these guys, right, and pull them up just so they kind of make, you know, a nice bevel like that. It's not too bad. Maybe it just needs a little bit more edge loops to keep it from looking too warpy. But that's how we can go about making this wagon. So that's not too bad. So this guy would be, let's say, essentially ready for UV unwrapping, but hopefully this helps kind of show a little bit of new tools using the symmetry tool, kind of pulling it all together, making something a little bit more complex than the can that we had made earlier. So if you have any questions, reach out. But until next time, thank you very much.